Hey YouTube, this is Tom at TM Aquatics, and I hope everyone's doing great. A little over a month ago, I promised everyone I'd be coming out with a full fish room tour that following week. Well, that didn't happen. Fast forward a month and here we are, but better late than never. Have a lot of changes to talk about, picked up some new tanks, got rid of some others, picked up some new fish, and I have a whole bunch of changes coming up here at TM Aquatics. Anyways, we better get started because this one might get lengthy. I do hope you stick around and check this one out. Alright YouTube, we're going to kick things off by starting out here in the rec room with this 75-gallon tank. I believe I may have mentioned in previous videos, I am planning to tear this tank down, really. I haven't really done anything with it. There's just one big piece of driftwood in there that has a bunch of anubias, Java fern, and bulbitis on it. There's not too many fish left in here. There's some cherry barbs, some red coral pencilfish, a couple of super red plecos, bushy nose plecos that is, and then there's maybe 15 or 20 honeycomb catfish. But really, I've lost all interest in this particular tank. If I do anything with it, if I do end up keeping it up and running, it may just turn into a grow out tank for juvenile Corydoras and Plecos, because I'm a little short, as you'll see here in a little bit later on in the tour. I'm a little short on grow out tanks right now. So but right now it's just a bunch of low light plants in there. Again, I really don't do anything with this tank, don't want to spend too much time on it. Eventually I'd like all my fish and all my tanks to be back in the fish room because it just makes it a lot easier for me. And I'll be moving away from any display type tanks out in the rec room. But anyways, that's what's going on here. Just again, that one big chunk of wood with some plants. And then I just ripped this big, huge piece of bulbitis out of one of the Corydoras tanks back in the fish room. It came out of the Corydoras Bozemanite tank, actually. So, but anyways, enough on what's going on with this tank. And let's keep moving and go check out the 120. So also out here in the rec room is the other tank, 120 gallon. This is a 5-foot, 120 gallon tank, and made a couple of changes, or just one major change back here. I used to keep about, let's see, I think I had 29 L134 leopard frog plecos in here, and I had caves stacked on top of caves and a bunch of slate in here, and had a few layers or levels of these caves, and I removed all but 12 of the L134 out of this tank. So there are 12 L134 leopard frog plecos in here. You'll see later again in the tour, the more sexually mature L134s have been rehomed into some new tanks back in the fish room, and separated and divided into some smaller breeding groups. And the 12 fish that were left in this tank happen to be the least sexually mature L134s. But also in here, the main draw really to this tank are these albino threadfin acaras that I picked up from Dan's Fish when they were just little itty bitties. Now these fish are pushing 6 inches. Look at those trailers and extensions on their fins. Just absolutely stunning fish. Couldn't be happier with them. I'm not really a cichlid guy, if you will. Go ahead and drop some food in there for them. I'm not a real big cichlid person at this point in my career within the hobby. Been there, done it with cichlids over the years, but these are truly a special, just beautiful fish. I absolutely love them, and if I'm fortunate enough that a couple break off and pair up, I'll do my best to try and get some successful spawns out of these fish. But they are just absolutely beautiful fish. The albino threadfin acaras, again, these came from Dan's Fish, and I picked them up again when they were maybe just a couple inches at most, and they've just turned into some real stunning beauties here. So, but anyways, that's what's going on with the 120 out here in the rec room. Let's head back to the fish room, where really all the magic happens. Alright YouTube, we're going to go ahead and start things off back here in the fish room, and we're going to start with this triple stack of 40 breeders. And in these 340 breeders that I have, each one of these tanks has a group, or in one case groups, of some High-panserus. We'll go ahead and start with this top tank here. And I just want to offer my apology straight out of the gate, because this is a breeding for profit fish room. This is not a gallery, so we might get a little bit of glare and reflection as we try to shine the torch on some of these fish so you can see them. But this tank here has my group of L471 mini snowball plecos. There's a total of 14 of them in here. They're still young fish growing out, but nice jet black body with the white polka dots. Just a real nice looking fish. Doesn't get too big, stays around that 3-inch size. Really like these fish. They all came from Dan's Fish, who I highly recommend. Dan brings in a lot of different fish that are sometimes hard to source, and he does a phenomenal job with conditioning the fish and shipping the fish. So can't recommend Dan's Fish enough. But all 14 came from Dan at Dan's Fish. That's what we have going on in this tank here. The middle tank, this is a real special group of fish that I absolutely love. This is where I have my group of L174s. There are a total of 15 L174s. Now, just like the L471s, the L174 stays small. 3 inches is about as big as this fish is going to get. They come out of the Rio Xingu, same water system as the L46 zebras, the L14 sunshine pleco, and a whole bunch of others. Now, 9 of these came from Dan at Dan's Fish. 6 of them came from my friends Amy and Chris down in Des Moines from Shooter's Fish Room. There are a total of 15 L174s in this tank right here. The bottom 40 breeder, there's 2 different groups of High-panserus in this tank. They're all small juveniles growing out. I have 4 L46 zebras, and those all came from George at Nationwide Aquatics. You can see one of the L46s between those 2 pieces of rock there. And then there are 12 L236 RBs. Now, some of these RBs are borderline super whites. You can see that one there has extremely high white coverage. 9 of the L236s came from George at Nationwide Aquatics. And of those 9, there's 3 of them, maybe 4 of them, that have extremely high white coverage. In fact, this one, this is one of them, but there's a couple that have even better high white coverage than this fish here. I'll go ahead and drop a picture I took of one of them here not too long ago. The other 3 L236s came from Stephanie. I know there's one up in that fry cave. The other 3 came from Stephanie, and her YouTube channel is Aquarium Life. And the 3 that came from her are also very, very nice fish. They're L236 RB Basics. They do have more of the basic look to them, the more of the white and black worm line pattern like this fish here. But they're very, very nice looking fish. I think that one might be one of them that came from Stephanie right there. But that's what we have going on in this tank. But all these fish are still rather small and growing out. I'm not sure. The L46 zebras will be eventually moved in with my adult group of L46. The L236, I don't know if I'll keep them in this tank or split them, take those that are more white, high white coverage, put them in with some super whites, keep those that look more basic in a separate system. Not really sure. But that's what we have going on in this tank. The L236 RBs and the L46 zebras. Alright, this rack over here is a 33 on the top, it's a 55 in the middle, and a 40 long on the bottom. This top tank is where I have my adult zebra plecos. I've had these fish for quite a while, but I've been cursed or maybe blessed. The original zebra plecos that I bought all turned out to be female. Now, I do have some younger fish that are just reaching sexual maturity now. It looks like there's a couple of males in there. They're starting to develop some spiky odontode growth on their pectoral fins, so my fingers are crossed that we do have a male or 2 in this tank. and we'll eventually get these zebra plecos to breed. Now, zebra plecos are not any more challenging to breed than most of these other plecos here, but you do need both male and female, and that has been my nemesis with the L46 zebras. That's what we have up there. And again, the 4 juveniles that I have in this bottom 40 breeder, I'll eventually move them up to join the 8 adults that I have up here in this 33 long. That's what's going on up there. This middle 55-gallon tank, this is where I have my original group of adult wild-caught L134s. If you've bought L134s from me in the past, they came from this group here. So if you bought L134s from me in the past, they would be F1 generation. They came from wild-caught adults. That is this colony here. This past year, I only spawned about 170 or so from this group. The year before was a little bit less. The year before that was a little bit more. But I am hopeful that I get another 150 or so. This particular group is extremely seasonal with their spawning activity. They usually shut down, well, they start breeding around October, November. They haven't started yet this year. I'm hoping that by the end of November that they start spawning. I've been increasing water changes, been feeding higher protein foods, trying to get them ready to go, but so far nothing. But you know, just like every other year, I'm sure they're going to start up soon. And they'll usually spawn through March to April. Then they shut down for, you know, 6-7 months again. But if you bought L134s for me, they came out of this group of wild-caught adults back here. They're all just very beautiful fish. All right, down here in this 40 breeder, this is a change since my last fish room tour. In previous videos, you would have saw this tank housing my adult breeding group of Scleromystax barbatus. And I did get rid of the Scleromystax barbatus. And in this tank now, I have my L181 peppermint plecos. They're all juvenile still. They're still growing out. But a jet black pleco white dots. They'll keep those dots when they reach maturity and adult. They usually hold on to that bright white dot pattern on their body. I have a total of 10. You may have seen the unboxing video that I did of these fish, maybe, I don't know, was it 4 months, 5 months ago? Maybe 6 months, I don't think it's been that long, but they're growing quite nicely. Again, I have 10 L181s in here, and then I do have 6 or 7 longfin super reds in here that I'm growing out. Have some really nice high quality super reds. Not a fish that I really care for, but people ask me about it all the time, and if people are still willing to spend the money, I'm willing to grow some out. So we do have some really nice super reds. But that's what's going on in this tank here, L181 peppermint plecos and longfin super reds. Alright, these 5 grow out tanks, nothing really special happening here. 4 of these tanks are still filled with a bunch of koi angels that I never should have grew out here in the fish room. I knew I shouldn't have raised another spawn of angelfish. I've given a whole bunch away. I sold some in a club auction, and my LFSs have taken as many as they're going to take, and I'm still sitting here with 100 plus. They're occupying 4 of my 20-gallon grow-out tanks that I'm going to need here in the very, very near future for Corydoras fry. Not sure what I'm going to do with these angelfish. I'll figure something out, but I figure they have at least, you know, maybe a month or so at most before I've got to replace them and get them out of these tanks. So I'll figure something out. I'll find a home for them. I'm not shipping anymore this year, but so if you're local, if you want some angels, you can have some, but I won't ship any, so don't even ask. But that's what's going on in these grow-out tanks. This one here, I did recover from the koi angels. I had koi angels over here as well, but I have about 40 or 45 Barbados juveniles growing out. Before I got rid of the adults down here, they left a little present on the side of the glass just a couple of days before I ended up getting rid of them. I sold them in a club auction. I picked those eggs, hatched them out, and ended up with about 40 to 45. I think there may be 45 to 50 eggs. Probably 100% hatch rate, or darn close to 100% hatch rate, but figured I'd grow out one last group of Scleromystax barbatus. That's what's going on in this grow out tank. Alright, so this rack over here, I have two 20 longs on the top, a 40 breeder and a 20 standard on the middle rack. And on the bottom I have another 40 breeder and a 20 standard. And this rack here, all of these tanks have groups of Corydoras. We'll start out here in this top tank here. This is where I have my Corydoras duplicarius. I've not had a lot of productivity out of this particular group this past year. Hopefully that'll change this year, but real beautiful Corydoras, the duplicarius. This 20 long on the left, this is where I have a second younger group of Corydoras green lasers. Now I think in that Corydoras green laser group, I think there's probably 10 fish, but and I hand selected them, but I did a really bad job on the ratio. I'm really female heavy in that group, so I'll probably have to make some changes. But I noticed this group is out quite a bit. The adult breeding group is usually always hiding, but this group seems a little more outgoing. But the green lasers just sell very well, so I wanted to start a second group and hopefully pick up some or increase productivity. This tank here, the standard 20, is where I have my adult breeding group of Corydoras kanakis. Next to them in this 40 breeder is where I have my breeding colony of Corydoras bozemanni. Now there's 14 original adult breeders in there, and then there are some juveniles that grew out with the parents. It was my intent to net those out and sell them at a recent swap, the Quad City swap, where I was a vendor back in September. However, when it came time to bag up all the fish that I sold at the Quad City swap, I just simply ran out of time and opted to pass bagging these fish up. And so I ended up with maybe another dozen or so juveniles. They're now darn near the same size as the adults, and it's hard to distinguish the juveniles from the adults. So, but just absolutely beautiful fish. Really, really like the Corydoras bozemanni. Not an easy to source fish. Usually a very active, outgoing fish. They're usually up bumping the front glass when I come into the fish room. Corydoras bozemanni. Just a gorgeous Corydoras. Down here in this bottom 40 breeder is where I have my adult green lasers. None of the adults are out. There's a couple moving around in the back. There's a couple of juveniles up here munching on a little pellet that I dropped in. There's about a dozen or so juveniles in here. Then as far as my breeding group, my adult breeders, my breeding group is like 14 to 16, something like that. There's a big chunky female coming out. Been stepping up on the water changes. They haven't spawned in quite a while for me. So I've been increasing the water changes, hoping to trigger some activity. This group is usually pretty shy. When I bust out the camera, they usually run for cover, but you can see a few, like I said, a few of the juveniles are out. But that's what I have in this bottom tank there, Corydoras green lasers. And then in this tank here, there are, although we are not going to see any, a young group of 9 Corydoras orange lasers. I have an adult group. However, they are over in this tank here with my L397s. As you can see, there's a lot of driftwood and slate and so forth. There's some of them out feeding right there. But it would be a nightmare to try and catch and net all of those orange lasers out of this tank. They did spawn in that tank for me once this past year. I hatched out the eggs, raised them up, only ended up with 9. And that's what I ended up putting in here. But good ratio on them. I think there's 3 females and 6 males, but just have to trust me that that is what's in there, because I do want to start spawning the orange lasers as well. And we have a real nice young group in there with good ratios, so hopefully by spring they start producing for us. But that's what's going on in these 6 Corydoras tanks over here. Alright, the next set of tanks that we'll take a look at are these 6 tanks here on this rack. There are 2 40 breeders on the top, 2 40 breeders in the middle rack, a 40 breeder, and a 29 gallon on the bottom. And you might notice this is a little bit different from previous videos. I used to have 7 10-gallon grow-out tanks up here on the top rack. I recently replaced them with 2 new 40 breeders so that I could create and start 2 new additional breeding groups of L134 leopard frog plecos. Earlier in the video, when we started out with the 120-gallon tank out in the rec room, I mentioned I used to have a lot more plecos out there. I took a bunch of those plecos, moved them back here to the fish room, split them up between these 2 tanks with really good male-female ratios. There's 7 L134s in the left top tank. There are 8 L134s in the top right tank. And then I moved 2 of the L134s from the 120 into this group with some juveniles that I spawned this past year, and growing out a 5th group of L134s back here in the fish room. But reason for that, I want to breed and spawn more L134s than my wild-caught adults will produce. I would like to be spawning and producing at least 300 L134s out of this fish room by next year. And the only way to do that is to create more groups, more breeding colonies, more systems. And that's what I decided to do. So in this top right tank, there are 8 fish. There are 5 females and 3 males. And they are sexually mature. So I do expect to get some fry out of these fish this year. In the top left tank, there are 7 fish. There are 4 females and 3 males. And again, these are all sexually mature fish. And I do expect productivity out of these fish as well. But it's just nice to have some new groups of L134s back here in the fish room. Down here, these 2 middle 40 breeders. The left tank, this is where I have my group of CW49, the black diamond Corydoras. I don't think I'm going to be keeping this fish around much longer. I just haven't had a lot of productivity out of them to justify keeping them in a dedicated system back here in the fish room. I did spawn and sell about 30 fry this past year, but that's just not enough, again, to really justify holding on to this fish. So I may be purging these guys, selling these fish off this next spring. We'll have to wait and see. The tank next to them, this is where I have my group of Corydoras equus. Again, I have not bred this fish in my fish room yet, but I do know why I've not really had any success. I have 22 fish in this group, 11 males and 11 females. And I just have way too many females, and it doesn't allow the males to place enough pressure on any one female to trigger her to start spawning. So I plan to remove 4, 5, maybe even 6 females out of here and thin that group down so there's only maybe 4 or 5 females left. and hopefully the males will then be able to put enough pressure on those remaining females to trigger them into spawning. But I've done the simulated dry season and so forth, you know, live foods, all kinds of stuff, and the males were really active. The females just showed no interest, and I kind of know why. So I've got to change that around. But that's what's in this middle 40 breeder. Down here, the top left, or excuse me, bottom left, this is where I have my Corydoras Schultzi Black, often referred to in the hobby, incorrectly by the way, is Corydoras Black Venezuelanus. These fish are not related to the Corydoras venezuelanus, nor are they from Venezuela. The proper name for this fish is the Corydoras Schultzi Black. Very active, very prolific, beautiful cory, but they're always out swimming, and against that white substrate, just such a nice contrast. Just absolutely love these fish. I did recently pull a spawn from them. There are, I don't know what's the best way to see them. There's maybe 35 little fry in there. You can probably see them. They're starting to eat on baby brine shrimp now, so it's all uphill. But this is the first group of eggs that I've picked in quite a long time, and had a nice hatch, and real happy with, you know, starting out with 35. That's fine. Would have liked a little more, but there'll be plenty of more spawns coming. But Corydoras Schultzi Black. Next to them, the Corydoras Weitzmanni. This is a 29-gallon tank. I don't know how many Weitzmanni I have, 14, 12, or 14. They have spawned for me a total of 3 times. The first 2 spawns were all unsuccessful, no eggs hatched. However, I am happy to report they spawned for me 3.5 days ago, and in this fry box, you can see some of the eggs still sticking to the side of the fry box there. We do have a bunch of wigglers in there. I don't really want to spook them too much. I don't know if you'll be able to see anything moving around. Yeah, you could. Hopefully you caught that. But there are half a dozen or so that have already hatched. There's some others with eggs have little tails sticking out, so they're going to be hatching. But hopefully by tomorrow morning we have, you know, 15, 20, 25 Corydoras Weitzmanni, and out of them hopefully the majority of them survive. But this will be my first successful spawn of the Corydoras Weitzmanni. Wasn't too long ago, maybe 8-9 years ago, this was considered the holy grail of Corydoras. Corydoras Weitzmanni, another just a stunning, stunning fish. All right, the next rack we're going to talk about, next group of tanks, are the newest tanks. Well, no, they're not. It's the newest rack to the fish room. The newest tanks would be these 2 new 40 breeders with L134s in them. But this is the newest rack here in the fish room. 360 breeders. Wonderful sized tank from Aquarium. The top tank has my group of L260 Queen Arabesque Plecos. And these were all spawned and bred here in my fish room at TM Aquatics. I did lose my adult breeding colony, but thank goodness I had a bunch of juveniles that I could save and grow out and start over with. There are a total of 28 L260s in here, which might be a little much for this tank. I might thin that down to, you know, 16 to 20 or so. They're still growing out though. They're getting close to reaching sexual maturity. They're just not quite there yet. But I did lose one here a couple weeks ago to a cave fight. Even though there's all these caves in there, sometimes 2 of them will like the same cave and have a little fight, and one will usually get a little scratched up more than the other. But this particular fish, she just got hammered really bad and succumbed to her wounds. That's what we have in this top tank. There is the L260s. This middle 60 breeder, I have a group of 14 L134s. These are juveniles that I hand selected and chose to keep to start another colony. A total of 14, 12 of them were spawned this year Two of them were spawned last year and came out of the 120-gallon tank. They're a little bit larger than the others. There's one of them right there, but this group of fish represents the 5th L134 group that I currently have here in the fish room. That's what's going on in that tank there. Then down below in this 60 breeder, I have a bunch of Corydoras kanakis. Now, I didn't pick any of these eggs. I didn't intentionally hatch these fry and grow out these juveniles. All of these fish came out of this tank, and I pulled them all out of this tank today. In addition to the breeding adults in this little tiny 20-gallon tank, I pulled about 35 to 40 Corydoras kanaki juveniles out of there. So if you want a Corydoras that's easy to breed, doesn't really have a tendency to eat its own eggs, doesn't have a tendency to eat its own fry, and is a nice looking fish, the Corydoras kanaki would be one for consideration. But that's what I have down here. I'd rather have Plecos in this tank. And there will be Plecos in this tank here in the very near future. That's why I need to deal with the angelfish and all these 20-gallon growouts over here. I need to move those kanakis. I need to move those juvenile kanakis, and eventually these blacks and whitesmani. All those juveniles need to go up here in these 20-gallon growout tanks. So we'll deal with that when we need to, but anyways, that's what's going on in these 3 tanks. All right, over here, we're just about done. We have 2 75-gallon tanks, and then we have a 40 breeder in this top 75-gallon tank. This is where I have my group of L494 Rio Peru, or Picoltia Rio Peru. Same family as the L134s, Picoltia. I do have both males and females in here. I have not had these fish spawn for me yet. Did recently add a couple juveniles. I think I'd like to add a couple more. Just by the looks of it, I think I have maybe 5 males and 4 female, or 5 or 6 males and 4 females from the original adults. And then I picked up 2 juveniles from my friends Chris and Amy here recently. That's what's in this tank. Hopefully they'll start spawning soon. Beautiful fish. The L494 Rio Peru. And then down in this tank here, this is where I have my group of L397s. And if you've been with me for a while, you know that I lost most of my breeding group of L397 a couple years ago. But I did manage to save a trio, a male and 2 females. And they had spawned for me, and I grew out some fry and was able to hand select and keep a bunch of those juveniles and grow them out. And they've been added now in with the adults to where I do have a nice sizable colony again. And they've just started producing for me. So up here in this fry box I have, maybe see at the base of this piece of cholla wood in there. There's like 10, I think 10 or 11. They're about 1.25 inches. That's the first spawn that I got out of them, and then there was another spawn, but the male kicked the eggs. I hatched the eggs, they hatched out, but out of 17, only 2 survived. Not sure really what the issue was, but so I do have 2 more over here. So, you know, small successes, but still successes, right? And there's one of the adult orange lasers. Thought I saw a few more back there. Yeah, I'd like to get them into their own tank, but that's just going to be too much work trying to get those orange lasers out of there. Which is too bad, because they were a really nice breeding group, really productive for me when I had them. Alright, so that's what's going on in these 2 tanks. In the last tank down here, probably not going to see much here. 2 groups of fish. I have Ancestris wobbin musters and L183s. And there's a wobbin muster right there. Real nice honeycomb pattern on its body. There's 10 of them in there. Another one back there underneath the sponge filter. You can see its tail. My apology for the bad camera work here. And then underneath you can see there's an L183 right there with the white seams on its dorsal and tail. I have a total of 12 L183s in here, believe it or not. You usually see a lot more. There's usually one sitting right out front on this piece of wood here, but of course, you know how it is. If you're a fish tuber, you grab the camera and the fish disappear. But total of 12 L183s. Now when I got these 183s, they were itty bitties. They were like an inch, some of them maybe even smaller than an inch. They're now pushing an 1.5 to 1 3/4, growing nice. The wobbin musters are growing real nice. Here's another 183. But the camera's not going to want to focus on that. But really happy with them. Can't wait till I can get those 183s in their own tank and get them growing. But that's what's going on in this final tank here. It's a total of 31 tanks here at TM Aquatics, and I took you through each and every one of them and showed you what's going on in each one of those systems. I know this video got a little bit long, but let's go ahead and wrap things up. Alright YouTube, well there you have it. I know this video got pretty long, but there are 31 tanks here, and I just wanted to showcase each species in each tank and take the time to talk about, you know, what's going on, some of the changes, some of the new tanks, some of the new fish, etc. So my hat's off to anybody that stuck through this entire fish room tour. I definitely appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch one of my videos. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to drop them down below. If you like the video, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you think I earned your subscription, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'd be honored to have you and bring you along on the TM Aquatics journey. So anyways, again, thanks for your time, and until the next one, we'll catch you all later.